I think it's broadcasting now, so we can stop that before. There we go. I think that was the magical 12-second mark that you can play a copyrighted item before you get jailed immediately. Welcome to your weekly DBT skills group. Sorry, it's Thursday instead of Wednesday. I usually try to post these on Wednesday, but the short story is I didn't do it yesterday, and I am doing it today, which is also the exact description of what happened. So, it's bonus late day. I just turned it into a special thing. I'm Dwight Hurst, of course, your psychotherapist and scorpion phobist. Phobist? I'm afraid of scorpions. Aren't we all? Email me, let me know. If you're also scared of scorpions, you'll enjoy today's broadcast. No, well, you might. Those aren't mutually exclusive things. I'm going to be talking about another one of the DBT skills that we use to cope with the world around us. Today's skill is another one in the mindfulness skills. So just to recap, we went over distress tolerance skills. You can go back in the series if you want to check them puppies out about distress tolerance, surviving distress. Mindfulness is a deeper philosophical mindset that we use skills to try to get ourselves into. Mindfulness, of course, meaning to think one thing at a time, to do one thing at a time, to live our lives a little more mentally, simply, cognitively, in a healthy way. And so today we are going to talk about that and how to make some of that happen. One of the things that's hard about mindfulness is that the brain is always moving really, really quickly. In fact, it's one of the things that makes us great as humans is we have the ability to remember and to imagine. So we're always living in the past or the future up in here. But sometimes when we are full of stress or in general, that can set us up to be more stressed. So we're going to be talking about what. It's actually just what, but I thought it was cooler to say what because I like it. What skills? You might say, what skills is he talking about? Yes, and you'd be right. What skills is exactly what we're talking about. There are 3 skills in DBT that are called the what skills. Observe, describe, and participate. Those are the what skills. So if somebody asks you, what skills do you have? You'll say, I have what skills, buddy? Because apparently it's your friend who asked you that. So tell them, buddy. We're going to start with observe because it's the first one. It's a good rule you could live by. Observe. One of the things with mindfulness that is a great skill to use is the observation of the things around you. Remember, way back when we talked about using our 5 senses as a distress tolerance, short-term calming skill, a distraction skill, if you will, to get your mind off of things. This is actually a way to bring this into a more day-to-day way. We talked about using your 5 senses, rather, to moderate and mitigate a stress reaction. This is going a little deeper than that and actually noticing the things that are around us. We go through the day usually with our minds occupied by the requirements of the day, particularly if we have one really big thing that is on our mind. Let's say that we are worried about, let me find it, something. That's pretty vague. So whatever it is that we might be worried about, let's say that we're worried about our house, okay? And so this is our house. This is your house. It's actually a church that was built in Bali, but whatever. I like to collect strange geography pictures. Now, you'll notice I'm holding this in front of my face. Kind of hard to see me right now because something's in front of the camera, between the camera and my face. This is what happens when we have a worry in our mind. Maybe I'm worried about my house and all the work that's been going on in my house. Maybe I'm projecting because we are doing some construction in my house right now. And so I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about nothing but it. And that is what is dominating all of my thoughts. And I'm in the car driving, but what is on my mind and what am I really seeing? Ooh, you get the picture? Get it? The picture that I literally shoved in front of the camera. Yeah, so that's what's on our mind. We can think about these things because we have an imagination to worry about the things that could happen and memory that recalls things that are not in front of us right now. Well, the core idea of mindfulness is that we try to live in the moment. So describe is a skill that I can use to try to tie myself back into the moment 2 times. One is reactively, which is really more of a distress tolerance thing. When I'm stressed, when I find myself worrying so much that I'm not driving well or that I'm not dealing with the person I'm talking to well. Secondly, and this is more in tune with mindfulness skills, just as a practice, I can practice describing to myself what is going on around me. So I can look around me and say, oh, I can see the little green light on the computer. That means that the camera is on. I can see the, square frame, rectangular frame. I don't have a tape measure of the screen of my computer. I can even see the things behind me in my office. I can see the light reflecting through the window, because when you do a Google Hangouts video, it helps to have natural light because it picks up things better. Who knew? I did. That's the answer to the question. So I can describe in my head all these things that are going on, and it can help to tie me into what's going on right now. Once again, the core of mindfulness is to hopefully do this in a semi-proactive way, to where I'm doing this not only to survive distress, but I am doing this just as a course of life. Just as, my day-to-day. So if observation is basically just noticing things that you wouldn't necessarily notice when you move through your everyday life. There's an old expression, stop and smell the roses. That would be like observing through smell the roses that maybe you walk by all the time. And I was talking about description. Sorry, I crossed the words, I just noticed. So observing is that first step. Hey, it's a free video, guys. Get off my back. So observing is just noticing the thing around me. And then description is actually taking it to that next step, which I already started to do. If I was to observe my computer in front of me as I'm doing this, description would be to actually go the little bit step further and say, it has a little green light. And if I look at the little green light, I'm probably looking at the lens, which means it looks like I'm looking you right in the eye. If I notice my computer, maybe I actually describe in my mind that it's sleek and it's working. And that's why I bought this computer, because the other one wasn't working. And it's nice to have a working computer. That's the next level of description, if you will. One of the things that is difficult as we're rushing past things in our daily life, we don't observe them and we don't describe them to ourselves, is that sometimes we miss a lot of the things that are going on that are actually quite delightful. I had this experience about a couple of years ago. It must have been 4 years ago or so, because I was working for a community mental health agency, and I would park around the side, and I'd go through this one entrance that was near my office. And that's a very fascinating part of the story, is where I would park. But because of where I parked, I would pass by these beds that had these little beds that were basically bark and bushes and trees. Not a lot of flowers, just some stuff. And every time I walked in, I was vaguely aware of this bird chirping that I would hear, this psh, 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 aggressive chirping that I remember thinking, that doesn't sound pretty. Usually birds chirping is pretty. It was odd enough and jarred me enough that I thought, that's weird. That's a weird chirping. And I would just keep going because I was on my way to work. I was focused on work, and I had my first session in mind, and maybe I was running it a little bit close, and I didn't want to leave my client waiting, and I wanted to be able to get in and do good work. And I also had some paperwork due, because it's a big paperwork requirement in this job. And I had all these things, and maybe there was something going on at home where I just came from, and maybe I had to go somewhere tonight, and I was hoping the timing would work. And I would just move right past, and I'd do weird chirping. Well, one day, for some reason, I actually was in a more mindful perspective. Who knows why? It's not like I try to be healthy or anything, but I was walking and I heard that aggressive chirping, and I stopped, and I kind of glanced around and said, where is that coming from? Why is it always, that seems like a huge coincidence. And one of the things I noticed was a little bird actually on the ground in the bed that I was walking past every day. And this bird was going and had its wings raised in an aggressive manner and was oriented towards me in that way. So I walked a little further, and it settled back down. And I guess I had a minute to mess with this bird psychologically. So I went back, and it raised up again and chirped at me again. And I noticed as it raised up that it was sitting on a collection of eggs and that it had made a little ground nest, which apparently some birds do. I don't know if it's stupid birds or just breeds of birds or whatever. I don't really know, but certain types of birds apparently do nest on the ground. And this one had selected a place that probably several hundred people every day walked by. And so this bird was in a constant state of stress. And guess what? For someone like me, that's a metaphor that I could work the hell out of for a long time. And it was actually very useful and a cool little insight. But because I wasn't mindful, I didn't notice it for literally weeks. There had been quite a bit of time going by where I was just like, oh, it's not chirping. Go, 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 go. And so observing and actually going a little deeper and describing what was going on was a really cool experience. And it's just something I remember now as a funny and metaphorical look into the world of crazy stress birds. Why would I go into that? Well, I'll tell you, because observing and describing, they're both very important in the what skills. And you may have noticed by the way that I mix them up unintentionally that they're very close to each other. So if observing is just noticing the things around you that you usually wouldn't notice, describing is more deeply noticing those things and actually going the next step of just saying, what am I actually seeing? What are the attributes of the things that I'm seeing? I had a boss once when I worked at a college. My job was working for the maintenance department. Mostly I did locksmithing, where I would go and mostly we were changing out locks. It was long enough ago that all the doorknobs were round and highly illegal, and we had to change them for more ADA compliant lever things that everybody could use, which were also much better and more modern. Once again, fascinating backstory. Anyway, I remember this boss. He would come and work with me sometimes, and we went to this faraway building one time when we put all this new hardware on all the doors and all that. And we went into the bathroom, or this is not like a weird blue kind of a story. Anyway, at one point I was in there and he came in and this large public restroom, and all of a sudden, as I'm washing my hands, you can hear that, and he's washing his hands, I hear him just start to laugh. And I look over, I'm like, what are you laughing at? And he said, look at this. And he said, come here, look at this. And the sink that he was using had a paper towel dispenser right next to it, and about that much space in between the sink and the towel dispenser. Okay, there we go. And it had a little hand crank that you had to turn for the thing to come out. They hadn't outfitted all the automatic devices that have made our lives much better since then. Our robot overlords had not yet taken over all those duties for us. So anyway, he had to do this crank, and he's like, look at this. There was exactly enough space between the sink and the paper towel dispenser. And you had to like tweezer your fingers in there to actually turn it, because there wasn't really room to turn it. And he thought this was hilarious. So for me, that's a good example of the difference between observe and describe. Because I noticed I was in a bathroom. I was probably being somewhat mindful at the time because I was working, I was tired, I was ready to move on, I was washing my hands. You notice all those things if you stop to notice it. It's a pleasant break in the day. That's a mindful attitude all in and of itself. But he took it to this level of, that's funny. Here's a thing about the design of this bathroom. And he was a big architecture guy. There's something about the design of this bathroom that I'm going to stop and get a kick out of. And so that to me is that taking it that little level deeper. And it's very difficult to do if you're living your life in a state of constant, it's a clinical term, and that's how we do when we are very overwhelmed. We just move forward, overwhelmed all the time. And we just don't see the humor in things or the delight in things, or we don't take time to be grateful that something's working. That type of a thing. So there we are with that. I want to mention this one because it's also one of them. That's the main reason I'm mentioning it. Participate. Participate has to do with the principle of acceptance, by the way. There we go. To participate in things means that I don't just observe and I describe to myself what's going on habitually, but I start to make decisions about what I do with my day based off of what is really happening. One of the things that can also stress us out, along with this memory and imagination, living in the past and the future, and worry, is that we tend to sometimes give in to the tendency to want to live in a fantasy world. We want to respond to the world as we wish it was. I wish I had enough money to do blah, blah, blah. And so I'll either act like I do, maybe make a poor decision, or I'll just check out and just avoid that whole thing and not even think about it, not talk about it, and just be resentful and be stressed. So the idea with participate is to say, oh, I've got this situation. I'm noticing it's happening right now. Let me deal with it, and let me actually make decisions based off of the presence of this situation. One such example is if I am with people, maybe in a social situation that's a little anxiety provoking. Participating with that would be to actually talk and deal with and react to what's going on, instead of retreating into myself and saying, I want to avoid this whole situation. I just won't say anything. And then I'll get awkward, and then I'll feel awkward, and maybe they'll treat me more awkward, and then I'll just withdraw, and I just won't come out next time to hang out with these people or whatever. Let's assume that these are good people, that it's healthy and you want to hang out with them for the sake of this scenario. Participating would be actually trying to engage in what's going on. Sometimes we overthink this. We think, I'm not brave enough to participate in this situation. I'm not skilled enough socially to participate. And so there's a trick to this. My trick to participate is to just ask myself, what would participation look like in this situation? What would participation look like in this situation? What would it mean to participate? That's another way to say that. Changing the wording. You can use your own wording. What would, and I think I've mentioned on these trainings before that one of my favorite little cognitive tricks to do to yourself, to help yourself function better, is to actually ask yourself, what would someone, fill in the blank, well, specifically, what would someone more fill in the blank than me do in this situation? In other words, what would somebody more socially adept, what would somebody more smart than me, what would someone more better looking than me, what would someone more confident than me, what would someone more tall than me, what would someone more racist than me? Well, don't do that one, but you get what I'm going for. What would someone do if they were super good at participating in this situation? And sometimes you can think of something. And here's the thing, with participation, if you can think of one thing, you can do it. If you think to yourself, oh, I might, if I would tell that joke that I know, or whatever. If you say, I would laugh at other people's jokes. I would ask a question when I have one in my head. When someone said, oh yeah, of course, that was before I moved to Zimbabwe. I will actually ask, oh, when did you move to Zimbabwe? Because that's what participation would look like in this conversation. Sounds simple, but it's actually a practice that can be deeply difficult and go against the grain for those of us who tend to be very emotionally sensitive. When we are living our lives in a state of feeling triggered and overwhelmed much of the time, it's very difficult for us to observe what's around us, to describe it to ourselves, to keep those two separate. It's another thing that's hard. And then to participate as fully as I possibly can. And so with the what skills, what I always say with any skills is, try to pick a couple areas to practice. Try to just notice what's going on around you as you go to wherever you're going today. After you watch this video, notice what is happening when you turn off your phone or computer or mobile device. Notice what's happening when you get in your car to drive somewhere later on. Notice what you're doing with your hands. Describe to yourself something about the car that you're in or what's happening. And then ask yourself, is there anything I could be doing to more better participate, to more better grammatically correctly participate in what's going on around me? Because the chances are you'll find it. Maybe I'm just driving somewhere, and instead of worrying about what I'm going to do when I get there, I could turn on the radio or listen to a podcast. Primarily the Broken Brain podcast, which is the sponsor of these skills videos. Hey guys, little plug at the end. Thanks for listening, watching, whatever you be doing with this video. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to share this. I am sharing this as a free resource or a free source. to those out there who are interested in deepening their understanding of dialectical behavioral therapy and learning more about the skills. As always, this is brought to you by the Broken Brain Podcast, my podcast, that you can see here on the Broken Brain Podcast YouTube channel sometimes, and you can hear it on iTunes, or you can also hear it on my website. So www.dwighthurst.com/podcast. And stay tuned here for our next skills workshop, which will come next week. Until then, stay mindful, everybody.